They always like distance so that you do not understand that their policy over here is having this impact over here. This system is so fragile that holding your wealth in there is so dangerous. They want you to think that this is an old relic. Why are they buying it hand over fist? Why have they never been able to duplicate it in a lab? Silver as well. There's a finite amount of this. As you have seen, there's an unlimited amount of that. It's easy to create new. It's easy. They just have to push a button and they can create as much as that as they want. But what happens is that whatever is already out there goes away. It loses more and more value until we hit zero. Please tell me why nobody talks about that. But the reality is we're at endgame and we've got so many things in place that can push us over. Central banks recognizing the revaluation potential of gold. So central banks have what's called a revaluation account where gold is revalued on a regular basis based upon their initial cost and the current inflated value of it. But this is the tool that they will use to do that overnight revaluation, where they take this garbage that has absolutely no value. Yes, you can still buy stuff with it right now, but that is only because people still trust it. They grew up with the dollar, or I don't care what country you're in that currency, right? And what did they know? They knew that people marry the legal money of the state. So don't change the name, just change what backs it. Just change what it is. Okay, well, that's what I think about that. But they take this that has no intrinsic value, used only in one place, and they revalue it against gold, which is used in every single area of the global economy, period, end of discussion. Does not require a government to say this is legal tender. It is money for thousands and thousands and thousands of years. That's how the overnight revaluation occurs. That's when they lop off those zeros, and whatever you have in the system, I don't know how much that revaluation is going to be, but typically it's about 1,000 to 1. So you go to bed at night, you have $1,000. When you wake up in the morning, you have one. In the meantime, spot gold, the contract gold, right, has gone up 1,000 times, 3,000 times, whatever that number's going to be. What in the world do you want to be holding when that happens? Because it will happen. It is inevitable with everything that's happening. And with banks buying more gold than they ever have historically, they're preparing for the revaluation, period. After it became apparent what was happening twice, not once, even though that's all that they seem to talk about in here, but they raised the rates on the emergency loan program to stop the arbitrage, which, by the way, ends on March 11th. So they knew for a long time that they knew when they first kicked that program off that was what was going to happen, and they saw it happening again, and they waited until just recently to turn that free money spigot off. Okie doke. But they're going to see higher borrowing rates effective immediately, but of course that will not impact all of the loans that they gave out during that other period of time. And shocker that the use of the Fed Term Funding Program is at a record high before they close the spigot. It's amazing. And now it can be no lower than that of reserve balances in effect on the day that the loan is made. But the loan is for a year. So wherever that is, yeah, those that already got in on that free money trade, until those rates come down, they're still making free money, hand over fist.
In today's financial world, we're constantly bombarded with complex jargon and convoluted policies that often mask the underlying truth. The reality is that our financial system is precariously balanced, and the wealth you hold within it is at greater risk than most realize. The powers that be, governments, central banks, and financial institutions, want you to think of gold and silver as relics of the past, irrelevant in our modern economy. But if that's the case, why are they buying these precious metals hand over fist? What do they know that we don't? The truth is, gold and silver have intrinsic value that fiat currencies simply cannot match. Despite all the advancements in technology, Scientists have never been able to duplicate gold or silver in a lab. There's a finite amount of these metals, and as history has shown us, they have been used as money for thousands of years, long before our current system of fiat currencies was even conceived. Let's take a step back and look at the bigger picture. The amount of fiat currency in circulation is virtually unlimited. Central banks can create more money with just the push of a button, flooding the system with new dollars, euros, or yen. But what happens to the value of the money already in circulation? It decreases, gradually losing its purchasing power until one day it could be worth nothing. It's a scenario that has played out countless times throughout history, and yet it's one that is rarely discussed in mainstream financial media. Why doesn't anyone talk about this? Because those in power have a vested interest in keeping you in the dark. They want you to continue placing your trust in a system that is fundamentally flawed. But we're approaching the endgame, a point at which the cracks in the financial system will become impossible to ignore. Central banks are already preparing for this moment by accumulating gold, a move that signals they understand the revaluation potential of these metals. Central banks have something called a revaluation account, where the gold they hold is revalued based on its current market value. This is not just a bookkeeping exercise, it's a tool that can be used for an overnight revaluation of the currency. When the time comes, these central banks will revalue their fiat currencies against gold, effectively wiping out the value of the old money and replacing it with a new system backed by something tangible, something real. Imagine going to bed with $1,000 in your bank account and waking up with just $1, as your currency is devalued by 1,000 to 1 overnight. Meanwhile, the price of gold would have skyrocketed by the same factor. This isn't a hypothetical scenario. It's something that has happened before, and it will happen again. The question is, what will you be holding when it does? The writing is on the wall. Banks around the world are buying more gold than ever before. They're preparing for a revaluation, and so should you. Holding your wealth in the current financial system is dangerous. It's like trying to stay afloat in a sinking ship. But by holding physical gold and silver, you can ensure that your wealth is preserved, no matter what happens to the fiat currencies of the world. After all, gold and silver aren't just pieces of metal. They're stores of value, recognized and respected across the globe. They don't require a government to declare them legal tender because they have been money for thousands of years. This is how an overnight revaluation occurs. The central banks will simply revalue their currencies against gold, and those who hold gold will see their wealth preserved, while those who hold fiat currency will see their wealth disappear. But the manipulation doesn't stop there. The Federal Reserve and other central banks are playing a dangerous game, using programs like the Federal Reserve's Term Funding Program to provide banks with cheap money. These loans are often made at near zero interest rates, allowing banks to make risk-free profits. But when the time comes to close these spigots of free money, the consequences will be dire. The problem hasn't gone away. It's just been papered over.
It doesn't surprise me, given the negative press and the very real arbitrage, which is those difference in rates for the free money, that presented itself. So of course they had to stop that, because the appearance of the Fed giving banks free money is not a good look, even though that is exactly what's happened and intended. They know that this problem hasn't gone away. Even though they make it look like it did, it's not. It's infiltrated throughout every single bank. The OCC, which is the Office of the Comptroller of the Currency, you know I use their stuff all the time, particularly about the derivatives in the FDIC-insured banks, says that his agency, the Fed, and the FDIC are crafting a plan, because right now when the banks use that discount window, it makes them look bad. So they want to change the rule and also change the image. The bid to change rules affecting discount window borrowing and bank liquidity requirements follows last July's sweeping proposal to require many banks to hold more capital to help them withstand a crisis. And of course, the banks are fighting that. Of course they are. So, why should they ever hold it? Aren't we in an ample reserve regime where the central bank will just come in and have their back? They seem to have done that last March and April. They always like distance so that you do not understand that their policy over here is having this impact over here. This system is so fragile that holding your wealth in there is so dangerous. But if you have physical gold and silver, you hold it and you own it outright. Because all we ever really see is just the tip of the iceberg. It's really all of those derivative contracts that are written against this that are impossible to ferret out because that is such an opaque market. But we've talked quite a bit about securitization and how everything has been turned into a trading product for Wall Street. So let's take a look at a few of those levels. This is by far not all of them. But student loans, 1.7 trillion, plus all the bets on top of that. Auto loans, 1.57 trillion. Again, we aren't seeing all the bets against this. Consumer credit, 5 trillion. And all those bets above it put it well into the quadrillion. And by the way, as a little reminder, these gray bars are crisis or official recessions. So what is always the answer to a recession? Inflation, more debt, more currency devaluation. And all of these are turned into packages and sold to you, the public, through your 401k, through your pensions, through mutual funds, through so many things. And you're the one that's taking the risk. But hey, if everything implodes, who are you going to talk to? If all your wealth is held in the system, who are you going to talk to? When will this end? Why can't they just keep doing it forever? Well, they'll do it until enough risk has been transferred. Once enough risk has been transferred to the public, that's when this game ends.
The Office of the Comptroller of the Currency, OCC, the Federal Reserve, and the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation, FDIC, are all working behind the scenes to change the rules around bank liquidity requirements and discount window borrowing. These changes are designed to make it easier for banks to appear solvent, even when they're not. But this is just another illusion, another way to hide the true fragility of the system. The reality is that our financial system is so fragile that holding your wealth within it is incredibly risky. But if you own physical gold and silver, you hold real, tangible assets that are not subject to the whims of governments or central banks. You own something that has real value, and that value will be preserved no matter what happens in the financial markets. As we move closer to the endgame, the cracks in the financial system are becoming more apparent. The manipulation of markets, the endless creation of money, and the looming threat of a massive revaluation are all signs that something big is coming. The question is, are you prepared? Central banks are. They've been quietly accumulating gold for years, recognizing that it will be the key to preserving wealth in the coming financial reset. They understand that the fiat currency system is on borrowed time, and they're positioning themselves accordingly. But what about you? If you're still holding your wealth in fiat currencies, you're putting yourself at great risk. The value of these currencies is being eroded every day by inflation, and when the time comes for a revaluation, your savings could be wiped out overnight. But if you're holding gold and silver, you're in a much stronger position. Gold and silver are not just hedges against inflation. They're lifeboats in a sea of financial uncertainty. They're assets that have stood the test of time, maintaining their value through wars, depressions, and financial crises. And as we approach the next great financial upheaval, they will once again prove their worth. But it's not just about protecting your wealth. It's about understanding the bigger picture. The financial system we're living in is a house of cards, propped up by endless money printing and market manipulation. Central banks can create as much money as they want, but they can't create more gold. And that's why they're buying it up, even as they tell you it's an outdated relic. Consider the concept of an overnight revaluation. It's not something that happens often, but when it does, it can have a profound impact on your financial well-being. Imagine waking up one morning to find that your $1,000 has been reduced to just $1, while the price of gold has multiplied by 1,000 times. This is not a far-fetched scenario. It's something that central banks are actively preparing for. In such a scenario, what would you rather be holding? A devalued currency that's worth next to nothing, or gold and silver that have retained their value? The choice is clear. And it's not just central banks that are preparing for this revaluation. The Federal Reserve and other institutions are making moves behind the scenes to change the rules around bank liquidity and discount window borrowing. These changes are designed to make it easier for banks to survive the coming crisis, but they also highlight just how fragile the system really is. The fact is, we're at a tipping point. The financial system can't keep going the way it has been. At some point, the house of cards will collapse, and when it does, the value of fiat currencies will plummet. But gold and silver will remain, just as they always have. So what should you do? The answer is simple. Prepare. Start by accumulating physical gold and silver. These are not just investments. They're insurance policies against the collapse of the financial system. They're assets that will hold their value no matter what happens in the markets. It's also important to stay informed. Don't rely on the mainstream media to tell you what's really happening. The financial press is often more concerned with protecting the status quo than with providing accurate information. Instead, seek out alternative sources of news and analysis that are not afraid to tell the truth about the state of the economy. Finally, remember that this is not just about protecting your wealth. It's about securing your future. The financial system is changing, and those who are prepared will be in a much better position to thrive in the new economy. Gold and silver have been money for thousands of years, and they will continue to be money long after the current fiat system has collapsed.
Stay informed about the latest developments shaping the precious metals markets with regular updates from the Finance Daily team. Not only that, but as a subscriber, you'll also receive timely silver and gold price notifications and early access to groundbreaking news unavailable to the general public. Join our free gold and silver newsletter today, link in the description.